Welcome, everybody, to Seattle Sports Union Podcast. My name is Abraham DeWeese. I'm back again with the Soulman, Brian Solack. And on the boards, we have the Savage Nathan Savage. And today we have a very special guest, Brady Farkas. Brady Farkas, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you guys having me. Thanks.
Now,
Thanks for coming on.
we've had a buddy of yours on the show before, or I guess one of your employees, so to speak, Taryn.
Taryn is awesome. Taryn works
He's
very,
amazing.
very hard. Is one of the hardest working people I know. I'm lucky to have him on our team over at Mariners Roundtable, and worked with him now for almost 2 full years, and grateful for him for sure.
Awesome. And you're not just on the round table, you're also on the Refuse to Lose podcast as well, right?
That's right. Refuse to Lose podcast every Monday, Wednesday, or every Monday, Thursday, and Friday. Excuse me, and the usual. Find us where you find your podcast. We're there.
Awesome. The Soul Man, Nathan, and myself are super duper Mariner fans, super duper Aqua Sox fans, and we got a host of questions. We're hoping we can getting some answers straight from the knowledge source himself.
I'll see what I can do.
Actually, tell us a little about you're from the state of New York. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I've been in New York for a long time. I was actually born in California. Only lived there for a year.
Okay.
Was in Seattle from ages 2 to 6. My most formative years were in Seattle, so my fandom was formed in Seattle. Then I moved to North Carolina for a little while. Then I've been in New York since I was 9. So at that point, we're talking now, 27 years having been kind of based in New York. I did have a time where after, when I was 24 or so, I went to Vermont. I was there for 7 years. Now I'm back in New York. So been on the East Coast for a long time, but the Seattle roots have always remained. The Mariner fandom, the Seahawk fandom is as strong as it ever was. And that's what makes what we've seen over the last 13 games so frustrating because those roots are still strong.
Most definitely. I'm guessing you were exposed to Dave Niehaus. I'm sure you were a fan.
Absolutely. Dave is, I'll still go through and watch on YouTube a couple of times a year, the 1995 Refuse to Lose video, the My Oh My video, the commemorative video that came out. It was sponsored by Eagle Hardware. I'll never forget it. That video came out. My Oh My, still go watch it all the time. It's partially what inspired the Refuse to Lose name because there was a portion. I mean, so the Seattle Times had these signs that were Refuse to Lose signs, and I have one in here, but you can't see it from where I am right now. And so they would give them out, and people would take them to games. But in that video, the commemorative video, there's a fan who I think it was when they played the Yankees in Game 5 of the 95 ALDS, and there's the guy standing outside the Kingdom. He's holding the sign. And he just says, "Please, please, please refuse to lose." And that has always been stuck in my mind, and that is what inspired the podcast name, throwing it back to that year. But yeah, going back and hearing those Dave Niehaus calls, whether it's Griffey, Edgar in the double, doesn't matter what it is, they're iconic. There's a large population of Mariner fans that grew up around Dave that you can never replace those memories for sure.
Nice.
Who did you grow up with this? Which team were you a fan of when you were growing up?
The Mariners.
Really? You guys could get the games back there?
Well, as I just said, I grew up in Seattle from 2 to 6. So,
I'm sorry. My bad.
So, no, it's okay. So what's interesting, I guess, is that so I was a Mariner fan, diehard, right? 2 to 6. You're in the backyard. You're playing as Griffey. You're being A-Rod in the backyard, right? Diehard Mariners fan. And I went to the East Coast, and I don't know why it necessarily switched, but so the Braves were on TBS, right? And the Braves were on the Superstation. The Braves were the only team we could get in North Carolina, and the Cubs were on WGN. So I watched a lot of Braves and Cubs games and no Mariners games for a period of a couple of years that I lived in North Carolina. So there was a period where I guess I would say I got into the Braves, right? I remember having a Javi Lopez and a Chipper Jones shirt and watching a lot of Braves games. And then Griffey gets traded to the Reds after 9. I don't know what it was exactly that kind of turned off the Braves spigot and went back to the Mariners. So I guess I would say there was a little period where I was into the Braves as well, but it was more out of necessity because the Mariners weren't accessible. And then I was just a Mariners fan on the East Coast, not seeing a lot of games, only when they played the Yankees. But then, once you get to probably 2003, 2004, now you're starting to get the MLB extra innings package is around and out. And now then it morphs into MLB TV and it becomes much easier. But there was certainly a period where it was a lot harder to get the Mariners and be an East Coast Mariners fan. But once you kind of weathered the Braves infiltration for a little while, it went right back.
That's right, folks. There was a time before MLB TV, and all you had were National League teams or just every single game of the Red Sox versus the Yankees shoved down our throats. So as much as you may not like the situation with streaming right now, folks, it's better than it used to be.
Yeah.
That is for darn sure. Absolutely.
Now, people may not, oh, I was going to say, people may not like paying all the different streaming fees, but I just want to quickly throw this out there for everybody. Tomorrow it's going to be on free TV. The game's on Channel 5 in the local Seattle market on NBC. So you're going to get 10 of those this year. So for cheapskates like our buddy Matt Page, yes, you will get to watch some Mariners without having to pay for it. Sorry, I had to do, and I'm not being paid by the MLB. By the
That's
way,
okay right there. No, man, that's a PSA you got to give. That's taking care of your audience. That's for sure.
There you go. So growing up, I got to ask. I heard you played varsity basketball in high school. What was
Yep.
it like?
Well, I played varsity basketball and baseball, both. You know, it was great on a lot of fronts, right? Like the friendship, the relationships, the ability to play something all year round for the most part, right? Not being kind of pigeonholed into one season was certainly a lot of fun. Look, I went to a very big high school though. I went to a high school where my high school was, you know, about 3,000 kids. In my class, we had 700 kids. So it was a very big high school. It was one of the biggest schools in New York. So I kind of fell victim to being good at both, but not great at either as a result of kind of never fully dedicating myself to one because it was so hard to even make a team given how many kids there were to then like be a starter or be a star on a team required the next level. So I ended up being good at both, not great at either. And, you know, never got the playing time that I would have wanted. I actually went on to college and played Division III baseball and got more time in college than I did in high school. So like, you know, just it was easier to play in college for me than it was to play at my own high school. And I think I was better by the time I got to college than I was in high school also. But no, playing two sports was great. Again, the relationships, the memories going into an opposing gym or an opposing field. We had a top 5 team in the state in baseball when I was a senior. And again, to do that at a very big high school was very, very gratifying.
You said 7-year class?
Yeah, 700 in my class alone.
Wow.
3,000. We had 3,000 in the school. The freshmen at my high school have their own building. They are totally cut off from the rest of, you know, from the other, you know, 10th through 12th graders. There's a shuttle that goes in between the two. Like if you're like a 9th grader who's in 10th grade classes or whatever. So there's a shuttle that runs between the two. I didn't know particularly well the 2 kids sitting next to me on either side of me at graduation. You know, we had, it was by alphabet, you know, it was alphabetized. We had been in a homeroom situation next to each other before because we had similar last names. Like in terms of like actually having spoken really prior to that, not for the most part. So you know, certainly a big school for sure. We had our graduation at an outdoor amphitheater, one of the biggest ones in New York. You know, there was no fitting in the high school gym at my school, that's for sure.
So, like, did we even have 700 in our entire school with teachers
No,
and
I was going to say
librarians and custodians?
we had like 180 in our graduating class, but yeah.
It was smaller than that.
Was it? I'll have
Yeah.
to do some research, but it was
Anyway, yeah, ours,
700.
our graduating class, fit within this 3-point line of one side of the court. So,
Are you guys big, like, are you big college hoops fans? Like we just watching the NCAA tournament?
you know, I was Brady, but it's
Yeah,
been
same
difficult
here.
to absorb the new world of college.
I totally agree with you. I only say this for the sense that so in the first round, Siena played Duke, and
Mhm.
Siena was a 16 seed, Duke was a 1. Siena is the college, you know, adjacent to my hometown, right? It's
Okay.
15 minutes away. My high school is bigger than Siena's enrollment, and that's the only point that I make with that story. It's just like that's how big my high school was, and it truly was bigger than a small college that goes to the NCAA tournament.
Oh, I totally get it. 7,000 at your high school was bigger than my alma mater, Eastern Washington University. So that's with the graduate students and, yeah,
Go Eagles!
custodian staff.
Go Eagles!
Yes, indeed.
Last basketball question. Were you a Sonic fan? I know you weren't in Seattle that long, but did you enjoy watching the Sonics?
Of course, how could you not? I mean, look, man, I you know, I go back to, I mean, obviously I have memories of earlier than this, but I go back to the 95, 96 finals as being one of the things that I latched on to early. And you're talking about, I'm talking, I mean, look, I could go down the list with you. I'm sure you guys could too, right? It's Peyton and Kemp for sure, but I can go to Hersey Hawkins and Detlef Schrempf and Sam Perkins, who's also from Albany, New York. Shout out him. Nate McMillan. Like I could just keep going, but love the Sonics. Then, obviously I moved out of New York, but still follow when you can, right? The Ray Allen years, Desmond Mesa years, the Rashard Lewis years, Vladimir Radmanovich, man, I love that guy's jumper. So like I was all in, and certainly crushing to see them go. I can only imagine how hard it would be to actually still have lived there and lived through it. My dad was from Ohio, so my dad's a diehard Cleveland Browns fan. So like I saw him live through the Browns leaving and ultimately become the Ravens, and how painful that was for him. And it was a similar experience for me, except he had, by the time that happened, he had 35 years of being a Browns fan under his belt. I had 18 of being a Sonics fan. So it's look, I'm happy they're going to come back. I'm happy they're going to come back as a new team rather than taking someone else's team. That's kind of the last thing that I wanted, was for them to come back at the expense of another team's fan base. But certainly happy that the Sonics will be back, no doubt.
On. Hey, similar to college sports, sports media has changed, and I know you've changed how your career has been shaped. You've now gotten into podcasts. Was that something you'd even thought about way back when, or are you just moving to where all the listeners are now?
No, it's kind of a long, windy path, but like the bottom line is like I was in daily radio for a long time, and I love daily radio. And the way that we thought about podcasting in daily radio was the podcast was just your radio show, right? Like the radio show ends and then you put up the podcast. And in a lot of ways, that is good because you want people to hear your work. At the end of the day, we all have a bit of an ego and we all work really hard at it. So like you want people to hear your work. So if you did a 3-hour radio show or a 1-hour radio show or a 5-hour radio show, whatever it is, not everybody heard everything that day. So I would like you to be able to hear everything that day. So for a long time, it was just, I'm going to do the show live and then we're going to recycle it later and you're going to be able to go and listen to it on your own time. And now my hard work is going to be justified because even if you didn't hear it live, you heard it after the fact. So I did daily radio for 10 years or so. And then when I got out of that and I decided to make the Mariners my full-time thing, right? Like I don't live in Seattle. I can't do daily radio in Seattle. So the way for me to still do what I had been doing, but do it about the Mariners, is to do it in podcast form. And it offers you a lot of advantages. There are still advantages to daily radio also, but it offers you a lot of advantages to do it in podcast form for a lot of different reasons. And I mean, we can get into the nerdy side of it if you really want to, but it's been very, very fun to build this show and to build this brand. And to, at the end of the day, look, as I said, I've been living on the East Coast for 27 years now. And all I've ever wanted was to talk about Seattle sports with people who cared. And nobody here does. So
No.
the way for me to do what I want to do and connect with people like you and other listeners who do care is to do it in the form I'm doing now. And it's worked out really well in a lot of ways.
Very nice. I do have to go. You mentioned you played college baseball. What did I see? You had 10 career wins in college?
Think so. I feel like it was about 10 and 9. You're going to get to my ERA question. I'm going to have a story behind that when you ask. So go right ahead.
Please go for it. You read my mind.
So, I don't remember what the exact number is at this point. I feel like it says my career ERA was probably somewhere between 5.2 and 5.8. It's somewhere like that. I'm going to tell you that the scam of college athletics at the Division III level is as follows. The people keeping the stats are generally student workers, and the people keeping the stats are also the home team's stats are the official book. My senior year, I ended up pitching on the road almost every game. So that meant that every time I pitched, I was getting a little home cooking on the score sheet in favor of the other guys. So like ground ball under the leg, ruled a single, turns into 3 runs, which now get all charged as earned, even though they all should have been unearned. Drop pop up turns into a earned run that shouldn't have been. So I remember specifically going to the sports information director at my school and saying, "Hey, is there anything we could do about this? Like I'm getting killed on these stats here." And like it's a ground ball to second that would right under the guy's glove, and they gave it a hit and it turned into 5 earned runs. And like, no, unfortunately we can't. So now I have to wear it in perpetuity that the ERA is listed at 5.8 my senior year or whatever, when it probably should have been about 4.8. It's still not something that I'm proud of, but is a full run lower than what shows up and is accessible to everybody that I get asked about.
The old Mark Twain quote, there's 3 type of lies: lies, damn lies, and stats.
Yeah, I had never heard that, but that sounds about right. I was certainly on the wrong side of multiple student worker score sheets.
18-year-olds doing the book. Hey, speaking of stats, are the Mariners, are their hitting stats as bad as we think they are, or is this just a blip, normal marine layer swoon in April? All these strikeouts, I'm feeling like about 3 years ago when we had 3 guys with 200 strikeouts.
There's a lot going on with this team, and there's a lot going on with the offense. And I can offer explanations, I can offer reasons. At the end of the day, we don't necessarily know exactly what the answer is. It's probably a confluence of all of them, right? Like, let's just run down the list. They are not doing either any of the things that you would think are conducive to scoring runs. First and foremost, they're not hitting for any power for the most part, right? Like, I want to say they have 11 home runs on the season, 4 of them, or 12 home runs, maybe 4 of them were on opening night. So they're not hitting the ball out of the ballpark. That's a huge problem. They're not stringing together any hits. That's a huge problem. If you're not hitting the ball over the wall and you're not being able to put 4 and 5 hits together in an inning, you're not going to score. So that is a huge issue. If you want to go and kind of start to, they're going to come off as excuses, but I'm hoping that they're possible reasons here. Certainly, the first homestand was brutal. The weather was horrific. It was super cold. I was there. The Cleveland series was tough to play in. The Yankees series was especially tough to play in. None of those games were comfortable. So that is 7 of your 13 games that are played in adverse conditions. Texas has become one of the best pitchers' ballparks. We don't think of it that way, but Texas has become one of the best pitchers' ballparks. I believe it's second to only T-Mobile in terms of being pitcher-friendly. So now that's 10 of your 13 games played in adverse hitting conditions. We can explain it and say, look, the Yankees might have the best pitching in the American League, right? So we saw Fried and Schlittler in that series. They dominated predictably. Then you go and look at it and say they just saw DeGrom, Evaldi, and Gore, 3 All-Stars and a Cy Young winner in the Texas series. So Cleveland's pitching staff is always good. You can start to explain away some of this stuff. We can also add in that it's early. It is an excuse, yes, but I think there is some validity to it. The World Baseball Classic guys all across baseball are struggling, right? Josh Naylor, Julio, Cal, they've all been bad, but it goes beyond them. Yohan Moncada played for Team Cuba, is hitting .091 for the Angels. Fernando Tatis is a superstar, is hitting less than 200. It goes on down the list of guys who played in the WBC that are out to very slow starts. So there's something that might have something to do with it. But at the end of the day, we've played 13 games and Julio Rodriguez and Josh Naylor have 0 extra base hits. You're not going to win when that is the case. And people want to blame this on Dan Wilson and people want to blame this on Jerry DiPoto. And we can find a nitpicky thing on Jerry here, and we could go to a bullpen decision that was or wasn't made by Dan Wilson. At the end of the day, what's hurting this team is the fact that they are not hitting, and their 2, 3, 4 hitters specifically are not hitting. The defense is also a huge concern, but everything is made bigger when the offense is as poor as it's been.
See, Soulman, you owe Dan Wilson an apology.
I'll talk to him after the game or the podcast. I'll text him.
Right.
Are you a Dan Wilson hater?
Actually,
Soulman likes Dan Wilson, but you got on his case about the Blue Jays series last year.
I did, but that's another story. I want to get back to. You mentioned the WBC.
Let's get back to Brady. Yeah,
I want to. You brought up in your podcast earlier this week. You talked about Randy Rosarina. He's been awful in the outfield, and he hasn't really been hitting the ball either. And you brought up the fact that maybe they should put him at DH, but he is in a contract year. And what are they going to do with Randy Rosarina?
I mean, I think there are 2 separate, very uncomfortable conversations that are going to happen here pretty soon for the Mariners, right? So first and foremost, Randy Rosarina has played very poor defensively, right? Like, we've played 13 games, and I can come up with 5 instances off the top of my head where there are misplays or plays that could have been handled better or differently or cost the Mariners dearly, right? 5 plays in 13 games is far too many. I think the best thing for this team is Cole Emerson comes up, plays third base. Brendan Donovan moves from third base to left field. Randy Rosarina moves from left field to DH. Dom Canzone will probably lose his time. That is what is best for the team overall. That said, the two uncomfortable conversations are we really going to bring up Cole Emerson before he's ready to save this team defensively, right? Like, do you want to stunt Cole Emerson's development to get him here quicker because the defense is so bad? Look, Cole Emerson has played he's 20 years old. He's played less than 50 games above high A at this point. Even Julio Rodriguez played 44 games above high A. Are we really thinking that Cole Emerson is like as fully developed as Julio was? And even Julio struggled the first month, as is typical, but even he struggled. He hit 212 or something his first month in the big leagues. So are we going to subject? We saw what Cole Young became last year, top 100 prospect, who really struggled offensively at a time. So are you going to bring up Cole Emerson too early just to kind of save the defense? That is an uncomfortable conversation. And then there's the uncomfortable conversation with Randy. Look, Randy is not a great defender, but Randy is 31 years old. He's been in the league now for 7-8 years. He's an established player. He's a guy who has been a star before. He certainly, and I don't mean this in a bad way, he certainly knows what the back of his baseball card is. He's certainly proud of his accomplishments. I can't imagine that guys like that want to go from being full-time, everyday, well-rounded players to being just a hitter. And then you throw in the fact that, yeah, he is in a contract year. And I don't know what the labor situation is going to look like, whether guys are going to get more or less, or there's a salary cap or whatever. But you know it as well as I do, Randy Arozarena has never been a free agent. This is his one shot to get a good contract in his life, right? So whether that is 3 years and $50 million or 5 years and $110 million or whatever, he wants whatever the top of his market is. And that market gets suppressed the minute he stops being an everyday fielder because it gets used against him. Just like a starting pitcher doesn't want to move to the bullpen when they're in a contract year, Randy's not going to want to move to the outfield either. And I don't want to speculate too harshly because I haven't really ever spoken to Randy Arozarena. But we saw how he handled the Cal Raleigh situation with the handshake in the World Baseball Classic. If that situation gets handled that way, how is it going to be when Randy Arozarena gets told, we don't think you're a good enough fielder anymore, we want to move you to designated hitter? I don't think that's going to go over particularly well. I'm not saying he would never do it. I just think it's an uncomfortable and difficult conversation. What's best for the team is what I outlined before. Donovan's not been particularly strong at third, and Randy hasn't been particularly strong in left. Moving both of them off those positions makes the Mariners better, but it comes with some consequences as well.
Well said.
Fantastic. We were talking about the stats, and one thing that actually our producer Nathan has noticed is that the Mariners struggle against left-handed pitchers. Is that a situation where we're putting out a bad lineup, or did we not build this team properly?
Well, I mean, look, I think the thought process, so there's multiple things going on here, right? We would love for the Mariners to have a team full of guys that are so good that they can play against everybody, right? Like that would be the goal, is to have a bunch of really good full-time players. Baseball in general has moved to this kind of platoon model, so I would blame baseball for that, not necessarily the Mariners. Even the Dodgers, the teams that spend, have platoon guys. So it's not just like, oh, they wouldn't spend money to go get everyday players. That's part of it, right? If they had signed Kyle Tucker, they wouldn't need this Luke Raley, Dom Canzone, Victor Robles, Rob Refsnyder quartet. If they had signed Kyle Tucker, he would play every day. So that is certainly a thing that exists. But all teams do operate in this kind of platoon window. What is hard for the Mariners is that they do need, they're banking on 4 guys to have to be really good for it to work, as opposed to banking on 1 guy for it to work. They need Canzone and Raley, and they need Robles when he's healthy, and Refsnyder to be good. And right now, those 4 maybe have had some moments. Refsnyder is over the season. He doesn't have a hit yet. Now, He was, I can't fault that process. He is, over the last 3 years, I think only Aaron Judge and Paul Goldschmidt hit left-handed pitching better than Rob Refsnyder does. Getting Rob Refsnyder was a huge move for the Mariners, and it was a great move for the Mariners. Now, was he 0 for 15? I mean, it's a small sample size, so I can't be like too mad at him, but when it's the beginning of the year, it's glaring. So the thing that's also an issue is you look at the Mariners, they have a lot of their core guys are left-handed. I mean, Brendan Donovan's left-handed. Cole Young is left-handed. I mean, those are guys you're not platooning at this point. So you're ending up with left-on-left matchups there. If you're playing, Cal at DH and have Garver in the lineup, that's somebody else that you can't play. So it just throws off the lineup a bit. They're definitely not as good as hitting left-handers. And, I would think that maybe a right-handed bat is something they're going to need as we get closer to the deadline. But they need to play better so we can have the deadline even matter at this point.
True.
Sure.
What about, I'm just shooting from the hip here, but what about someone like Patrick Wisdom? Couldn't they bring him up, I know he's not going to be a long-term answer, but he seems to be hitting the snot out of the ball in Tacoma right now. And I know he's a 4A player, I guess, but you think he could come up and be a spark for a few weeks and while they figure this out? Or
I mean, look, it's baseball. Anything can happen. Remember when Mike Ford hit, 15 home runs a couple of years ago, right? So you can find guys like that come up and can he hit 220 and pop some home runs? Can he hit 208 and pop some home runs? I would say that is possible. But you look at the problems on this team. They strike out too much. Patrick Wisdom, last I checked, was running like almost a 40% strikeout rate the last time he was in the big leagues. And then he went to Korea and ran a 30% strikeout rate. If you're running a 30% strikeout rate in the KBO, widely regarded as the third best league in the world behind the majors in Japan, then that's not eliciting me a lot of confidence that he's going to come up here and rake Major League pitching the way he's raking in Tacoma. Furthermore, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think Patrick Wisdom is 34 or 35. Those deficiencies are not going to improve. They're only going to get worse as he gets older. True. This team also, they struggle defensively, obviously. Patrick Wisdom is a very poorly regarded third baseman who's also 35. I would rather have Brendan Donovan at 29 and think, okay, maybe he can get a little better than put Patrick Wisdom out there. Patrick Wisdom could come up and DA. The thing they could do, and I'm not saying that they won't, right? So they brought up Connor Joe the other day, right? Robles got hurt. They brought up Connor Joe. And I think part of that calculus is that Connor Joe has versatility. He can play the outfield and he could play first and he could DH. So they put him at first and had Naylor on the bench. If they really wanted to, they could send Connor Joe down again, bring Wisdom up, and then have Ref Snyder play right field, Naylor play first base, and have Wisdom DH against left-handed pitching. Now, that would be a very narrow box for him to fit in, but that box does exist. Again, okay. You'd end up playing Naylor and Young and Donovan and all these lefties still, but there is a pathway to playing time where Patrick Wisdom is the DH, Ref Snyder's in right, and Naylor's at first. That does exist. They went with Joe, I think, because of ability to play the outfield, but if they just decide Ref Snyder can handle that for a little bit until Robles is back, then I think Wisdom could come up, yes.
Okay.
But I don't think he's the answer to any prayers.
I agreed.
One of the bigger arguments that we have is about Cade and Sloan, the two hot shots down in the farm. Any chance they come up? My opinion is that if they come up, something bad happened.
I think there's definitely a chance that they could come up. I would tend to agree with you that something bad has happened if they are up here, especially earlier than September, right? Like there's a chance, that could they come up in September and get a cup of coffee and be in the bullpen in the playoffs. Like I suppose that could happen even without it. But if we're talking about Cade Anderson and Ryan Sloan coming up, we're probably talking about somebody got hurt or somebody's getting shelved. And both of those would be problems. So I think both of them have a chance to come up. I did not think that necessarily going into spring training. After seeing them in action in spring training and seeing what Cade Anderson did in his Double-A debut, I do now think that they could be ready to pitch at the major league level in the same way that we saw Brian Wu and Bryce Miller pitch in 2023 before I think a lot of people thought they were ready and they held their own. I think they have the stuff and the makeup to come up, and I think that they could come up in September. If they're up earlier than that, I agree something bad has happened.
So we got all these wonderful starting pitchers. When are they going to make a long-term offer to one of them? I think they should go after Brian Wu. He would be my first choice. I mean, what are your thoughts? Who do you think they're going to lock up?
Well, I think we have to be fair to them, even though the front office, a lot of people don't like to give them credit. They've gone to Logan Gilbert multiple times. Mm-hmm. Like, so we don't know. I don't know the number, right? Like, that's not something that's publicized. I don't know what they've offered him. I don't know if they offered him a great deal and he turned it down. I don't know if they offered him a laughable deal and he turned it down. But Logan Gilbert has said on multiple occasions that they have talked. And clearly, they haven't come to a number that they both agree on. Now, Gilbert now is 2 years away from free agency. At this point, he might just look at it and say, hey, like, I'm this close. I might as well just take it, right? Like, he doesn't want the Colt Emerson deal at this point, right? The $95 million deal, he's going to get 210 if he goes to free agency. So, like, he wants to do that at this point. So, I don't know if they've talked to Kirby about a deal. My guess would be they have, but I don't know that for a fact. And we heard Jerry DiPoto say that they have talked to Brian Wu's representation, and clearly they haven't come up with anything yet. So if you're asking me who I would like them to go after, I would like them to try to sign Gilbert, and I would like them to try to sign Wu. I would prioritize those two. If they only got one of them, I would like it to be Wu as well. Look, Luis Castillo will be gone after 2027. Ryan Sloan or Cade Anderson is in his spot by the end of 2027 into 2028. Logan Gilbert or George Kirby will be gone in free agency, and the other youngster takes their spot. And so I would like to be able to keep the rotation intact where you're only having to replace two with Sloan and Anderson. But I don't know that they're going to be fortunate enough to do that. I mean, they might have to keep reinventing the wheel. I want them to go after Brian Wu. He's far enough away from free agency. I think it's still realistic to get something done early on him. I don't think they're going to get anything done on Gilbert at this point. And Kirby, I don't have a good sense on.
I get a little concerned that this is like a Zito Hudson Mulder scenario where all we can do is just hopefully trade him to get something.
You know, it's going to be so interesting because we don't know what the next collective bargaining agreement is going to look like. And I don't know how things are going to change. Like right now you have the compensation pick where you can offer the guy the qualifying offer. He turns it down and then you get a first round draft pick out of it, right? So you can say, I got something. Like the Blue Jays offered Bo Bichette a contract, the qualifying offer. He turned it down. They got I want to say a second round draft pick for that. Like that's not nothing, especially in the world of hoarding assets and farm system management. Getting a good draft pick is not nothing. So if that system still exists, then they can certainly take it out to free agency and recoup something with the draft pick. If the comp pick goes away in the next collective bargaining agreement, I think your point is more valid, especially if they think that Cade Anderson or Ryan Sloan is ready to come in right away and take that spot, right? If they think they can move Logan Gilbert or George Kirby and have these guys step in, then I think that's absolutely something that they're going to be interested or something they're going to entertain. And then, by the way, we'll see over the next 6 months if this version of Emerson Hancock is really the version of Emerson Hancock moving forward. But his presence could complicate things as well.
Is this kind of similar to the NFL where a lot of teams are going with the rookie contract quarterback? Maybe the Mariners are just like, we're going to use these pitchers until they go to free agency, and then we know we got more in the pipeline. We'll just keep bringing them up.
I mean, it's just the way baseball is in general, right? I think baseball, the industry, wants cheaper contracts, right? Like we all know that. So I think the industry likes the idea of signing Colt Emerson to an 8-year, $95 million deal, pushing off the need to sign him to a $280 million deal down the line. If the Mariners, they tried to get Logan Gilbert early, and they tried for a reason. They tried to get him at what is, they think, ultimately kind of a cut rate. And his people turned it down. And there's risk on all sides of all of this, right? Like if the Mariners gave him the money early and he got hurt, they're on the hook. If the Mariners gave him the money early, he took it and he massively outperformed it, then he got screwed a little bit. And it's always this game that both sides play. The Mariners have tried to lock up their guys, and they're doing it early because it's to their financial benefit. At least they think that it is. So, but once you get to the point where a guy's going to become a free agent, then yeah, that's when you see trades happen, and that's when you see teams let guys go. And it's not just the Mariners, and it's not just teams that people think are cheap. I mean, look, the Blue Jays traded Teoscar Hernandez in his contract year to the Mariners. They moved off of a guy that they clearly didn't want to pay big money to in the future to go and get something for, and they got Eric Swanson for him. The Mariners, to their credit, took on the last year of Teoscar Hernandez's deal in order to try to win. So all teams do this in all market sizes, and it's the game that we're playing right now.
I know we're getting closer to the end. We have so much to ask you, but will you talk a little bit about Roundtable Sports? Just educate our audience about it and what you guys do there.
Yeah, MarinersRoundtable.com is our Mariners site. The actual network as a whole has about 150 team sites, right? There's a Dodgers Roundtable and a Yankees Roundtable and a Marlins Roundtable, whatever, and across all sports. So we do a good mix of everything, I think, right? We have real journalists on our site. Myself and Taryn work on the Mariners Roundtable site. We do real stories. Taryn's at the ballpark every home game. I'm at the ballpark on a lot of road games. We're doing original reporting, on site. We have the podcast where we generate a lot of great guests and create content out of that for our listeners. But we also offer fans the chance to have their voice heard. On the top of our page is kind of big journalism. On the bottom of our page is more of a message board style, message board style. So if you want to have your voice heard or your opinion heard, you can do that in what we call our community section. It's totally free to join. But once you join the community section, you can have your voice heard. And look, I've been banned from Mariners Reddit, so it's a fun way to have conversations on our site because I can't be a part of the conversations on Mariners Reddit. So come on and have them in our community section.
Love that. And you do University of Washington too. You cover their sports.
Yes, we have the so University of Washington has a roundtable site. Taryn and I actually do work on that together. Taryn is working tirelessly at really helping us build that site. He was at spring practice today for the UW football team, getting the insight there. We're getting ready for the NFL draft on that front, seeing where Denzel Boston's going to go, Jonah Coleman, etc. So Huskies Roundtable certainly growing. Taryn covered a lot of the men and women's basketball games. The women's games were, both games are fun, but the women's games were far more successful than the men's games were this year. And, they had a great trip to the NCAA tournament, nearly beat TCU in the round of 32. And Taryn was there, every step of the way.
Awesome.
Right I'm going to have to listen to that. I wasn't aware you guys did the Huskies. That's
no podcast yet on the Huskies, but you can read. Okay. You can read on the Huskies. So HuskiesRoundtable.com there, Mariners Roundtable on us. Yeah, we have the Refuse to Lose podcast for the M's.
By the way, everybody, the UW women's softball, they'll be on the Big Ten Network on Saturday. Catch them. They're ranked number 14, but I think they're better than that, and I think they're going to go deep in the World Series. Just another PSA.
Right.
Before we wrap up, I want to say thank you, Brady. I mean, when I first heard about you through my brother, because he listened to you on the Mitch podcast, Unfiltered, and just following you on Twitter, and it's amazing what you say. You have an answer to everything, and everything makes sense, and I appreciate it. I know a lot of other people do too, so I just want to give you props at that.
Well, hey, I appreciate it. The way it was always told to me is the audience doesn't always care if you're right, but they like you to be interesting and convicted in what you're saying. And the way I was always told about it too is if you're going to be in this business, you have to be one of two things. You have to be entertaining or you have to be informational. I don't consider myself all that funny, so I try to be more informational and try to make people think. They do not have to agree with everything I say. I always welcome debate and discussion. But if I've made you laugh or made you think, then I consider it a job well done. If I haven't done those two things, it's time to go back to the drawing board. So I do try to be well-versed. I do try to be well-prepared. I do try to have an answer for everything. Doesn't mean it's always right, but I try to have kind of logic behind what I'm thinking.
You made me think for sure, and I had a good laugh listening to Tuesday's show and hearing Aaron Goldsmith tell you to get out of his chair or whatever he was telling you, but that was kind of funny.
So, what's interesting is that, so I didn't address that on the podcast, and I meant to.
Okay.
So I was speaking, it was Monday, March 30th. Mariners were playing the Yankees. It was the first game of the Yankee series, the one the Mariners won on Cal's walk-off down the line. So I interviewed Ryan Rowland-Smith, and it was the first time I'd interviewed Ryan Rowland-Smith, but we had tried to set it up for a while, and it finally worked when I was in Seattle. And so I was sitting in the broadcast booth with Ryan, and this were maybe like 4 hours before the game at this point. So Aaron comes in and gives me a hard time for being in his chair as I'm recording with Ryan. So he realizes I'm recording with Ryan, and then he kind of backed off a little bit, but you could hear him kind of joking in the background. Thanks for getting, I'll sit over here. I'll go over here. I'll enjoy my heater. And he's giving me a hard time, but like, I can't respond because the interview is rolling with Ryan. But he knew that, so he was kind of busting my chops. I never addressed what that was on the podcast. I will have to do that. But yeah, you could hear it in the background. I just didn't go back and mention it. I'm glad you picked up on it being Goldie. It was all in good fun. Yeah, so that was my Ryan Roland Smith interview featuring Goldie a little bit.
Well, as we always do, we like to wrap up the show with a positive note, and we call it our shout outs. Again, it's something that makes you happy in life, someone that makes you happy in life. We always like to do this. Why don't you start us off, Soulman?
All right. It's difficult for me to say this, but I want to say happy birthday weekend to you, Abraham. You are appreciated, whether you think so or not. So happy birthday. Hope you have a good birthday weekend.
Something like 200 episodes where you tell me I'm not appreciated. It's good to have one where I am.
There
Thank
you go.
you. I'm going to give a shout out again to the UW women's softball. Go check them out. It's always a lot of fun. You're right there on the water. It's a great little stadium. They are increasing the prices, but that comes with success. Go UW women's softball. How about you, Brady? Do you have a shout out?
I'm pumped for our building at Roundtable Sports. We are about 6 months old at this point. We started on September 1st. Taryn and I worked together previously somewhere else, but we came over and launched Mariners Roundtable on September 1st. So we're just over 7 months old, I guess. We're growing rapidly, and the listeners of the podcast, the readers of the website have been great in helping us do that. We've cultivated kind of a nice community already. We want more, so go and join the community at marinersroundtable.com. Have your thoughts heard. We'll interact with you. We love kind of meeting the listeners where they are and meeting the readers where they are. So we got a great episode of the podcast coming out on Friday as well. I'm looking forward to that being released. Well, at this point, Mariners farmhand, Rainier's pitcher, Casey Lawrence, is going to stop by. 38 years old, still doing it in Tacoma. So Casey Lawrence stops by on Friday. I'm pumped for people to hear that.
Awesome. And we got a shout out from our producer as well, and that's to all the Japanese rookies out there, Murakami in particular for the White Sox. I want to thank everybody out there for listening to us here on YouTube and on Spotify. And I want to give a big thanks to our very special guest, Brady Farkas, for joining us this week. And on behalf of the Soulman, Brian Solack, myself, Abraham DeWeese, and the Savage Nathan Savage, we'll see you guys next time.
Go Mariners.